How did the world's most preeminent mind come to believe in Jesus Christ?
What is the God you believe in?
I think that the claim that Christ is the embodiment of the prophet and the laws, I think that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
That's complicated. It's very, very complicated, but I think it's true.
so you believe that Jesus was
God?
God?
Yeah. I think if you understand what that means, that it's indisputable.
It is written, surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me, and every tongue will acknowledge God. The word is living. Amen. But how did Jordan Peterson, coming from a psychological and atheistic background, come to acknowledge Jesus as God and accept Christianity? Here's what he has to say about what atheists got wrong.
It's a story about the psyche in society, in the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what's underneath that? The source of nature, society, and the psyche.
This is an interesting question. It's a very direct one, but I would love just an answer that because I haven't got clarity on this. What is it you believe? What God is it that you believe in? I've heard you talk about this sort of substrate idea and such, but in a simple way that I can understand, do you believe in a man in the sky God?
If you don't have a man in the sky, you have a man on a screen. Just because you get rid of God, don't mean you won't worship anything else anymore. People will always worship something, someone. Some are just honest about it, and some lie about it. Because ultimately, to deny the Creator is to deny the creation. And to deny God is to deny yourself of everything that is beautiful and good within you.
Do you believe in it's a
Well,
force?
that's not as primitive a conceptualization as the atheists would have you believe.
What is it you believe?
Well, there isn't anything more complex in the known universe than a human brain.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want a model for reality as such, like proclaiming that it has something akin to the structure of the human psyche is not an absurd claim, given that that is the most complex thing by far that we know of, by far.
So what is it you believe?
Well, I've been explaining it.
But I mean,
I did say, I mentioned something which we skipped over very quickly because I introduced it too rapidly. The postmodernists figured out that we live in a story, but then they leapt to a faulty conclusion of two forms, well, three. There's no uniting story. That was one of their conclusions. In fact, the definition of postmodernism is skepticism of meta-narratives. There's no uniting story. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, that's a stupid theory because there's no union. So what? There's just diversity. Well, we worship diversity now in this utterly foolish manner. There's no difference between diversity and war. Without a uniting narrative, there's nothing but war. So, no, that's not going to work. Wrong. Hedonistic self-gratification. There's Michel Foucault for you to a T. It's like, why is that wrong? Why can't people just do what they want with whoever they want all the time? Because it defeats itself, and quickly. It's not a sustainable game. If it's all about you and your whims, I don't want to be anywhere near you. And that won't be so good for you. That's not going to work. Power. That's really where the postmodernists landed with their, what would you say, temptation to turn towards Marx. It's all about power. It's like, first of all, that's probably a confession, if that's what you believe. And second, no, it's not. Try tyrannizing your wife and see how well that works for you. Try tyrannizing yourself and see how successful you are. Power's not the game. Okay, what's the game? What's the story? I mentioned earlier, it's voluntary self-sacrifice. Right, you offer yourself up in the service of something higher. That's the basis of society. That's the basis of psychological stability. The Christian insistence is that that's the basis of the world.
The death of God, as Friedrich Nietzsche would have it, led to the atheistic trinity, or the three paths which atheists paved. One is power, second is diversity, and third is pleasure or ego. The first one that Jordan Peterson mentioned was the diversity, or more so the pseudo-equality that atheists presented actually led to more division in the world, and more division means no unity, which led to wars, because diversity ultimately leads to war. If you keep on going in separate ways and you don't agree on one unifying thing, it's inevitable. Secondly, atheism leads to hedonism. Pleasure, meaning pleasure is purpose, that nothing else matters and you only have to please yourself. You have no obligations to any others. You don't have to do anything for others, no sacrifice, and all you need to do is please yourself. It's ultimately the worship of the self or ego, which gives way to the narcissistic society that we see today. And thirdly is power. When you take the power away from God, the power is still there. It is just simply transferred to man. Now, we don't have the power to the ultimate good. We have a power to just men like you and me and everybody else, meaning it can be corrupted. And that's what we've seen all throughout history, ever since Nietzsche declared that God is dead. But ultimately, it was just men trying to make themselves as God, just as the whole history of humanity is. But don't forget that there was only one God that made himself man. In conclusion, atheism isn't just a void, it's actually filled with a lot of negative things of society. When you look at it, that it was just God that was holding all the goodness of society together. So once you took that, you're left with all the negative aspects. You thought that once you take God out, you'll still be left with all the positive. But in actuality, this is the only thing that was keeping everything together. And ultimately, atheism leads us to a tyrannical, narcissistic society, embroiled in the chaos of our egos. And we've seen that all throughout the leaders of the 20th and the 21st century. So Christianity is the antidote to chaos. Love thy enemy. And Christ is the pill you have to swallow to be saved from the poison of the world. If you don't follow the divine, you are forced to perish under the will of fear. Because if there is no light, then darkness is all we have and all that we are. And that's a predicament you don't ever want to find yourself in. But faith is the only seed which grows in darkness. And so was it sown in Jordan Peterson's life.
Has your belief in God, religion, been shaken at all?
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Because you've been,
Constantly.
over the last year and a half, 2 years, you've been through a particularly difficult time with losing people in your life that are sort of foundational to you. Tammy as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I was in extreme pain for 3 years. Right. I went through 3 years where every minute of my life was worse than any minute I'd ever had previous to that. It was terrible. And did I lose faith? Was it questioned, challenged? Absolutely. Absolutely. It just became absurd. It was absurd. So many things had gone off the rails. My wife was dying, my daughter was ill, things had blown up around me in 50 different ways, and I was like seriously in pain. It was terrible. I was walking like 12 miles a day because I couldn't sit. I did that for months. Winter, rain, whenever. I had a friend who walked with me. It was terrible. And yeah, I mean, I thought, what was the desperation? It wasn't even the pain. It was the fact that I was in such terrible shape that I felt that I believed that I was a burden to everyone around me and that was only likely to get worse. And I thought, what's the sense in this? What's the possible significance of this? So yes, everyone's faith is challenged. I mean, Christ himself cries in despair out to God on the cross. And the story wouldn't be believable without that. Like, if you're going to live, you're going to be pushed past your limit, right? If you're going to live. So, but who knows what you discover when you're pushed past your limit?
Your character is revealed through the consciousness of suffering. The struggle is the mirror which reflects who you truly are. And every other image that we see ourselves separate from the struggle is but a mere reflection of a mask we put. So if you really want to get to know yourself and see yourself for who you truly are, you're going to need to weather the storm. You're going to need to go straight through it, because the truth of you is found in the eye of the storm.
I'll give you a brief explanation of why. Christ takes the sins of the world onto himself. So that means all the problems that there are his problems. Right. Okay, so the idea there is that there's no difference between making that assumption and then actually beginning to address those problems. And there's no difference between that which best addresses the problems of mankind and the divine. Those are the same thing. And I can't see how that can be otherwise, because the contrary hypothesis would be that you would adapt best to your life by avoiding things that are difficult and terrifying. And no one believes that. And so the pattern of the passion, this is the voluntary self-sacrifice issue taken to its extreme. The pattern of the passion is the decision to voluntarily confront and welcome anything that happens to you, no matter what it is. And that's a terrible thing to ask or endeavor to undertake, but well, the alternative is to shrink away. Well, the spirit of shrinking away is the divine. It's like, I don't think so. Like that's preposterous. The spirit of unlimited courage? Well, that's not a bad start for a definition of what constitutes the divine. The highest possible value.
Life isn't fair, is it? Doesn't appear to be very fair. Because, I mean, this is how your story ended in that regard, but it could have...
I don't know if an adventure is fair. I don't even know if that's what we want. Like, this is something I really came to understand more deeply when writing this book. Now, what are we built for? We're built for maximal challenge. And that isn't the way we view ourselves in the modern world. We view ourselves as built for pleasure, pornography. We view ourselves as built for consumption or for safety or for maybe for egotistical self-aggrandizement and fame. All of those things are better than their absence, let's say. I think part of the reason that Andrew Tate is so popular among young men, because it's better to be a successful reprobate than a useless scrounger. Seriously. But that's why the villain in stories is often admirable compared to the coward, right? At least the villain is out there like doing villain things, but...
At least he has meaning.
Well, and he's not...
The villain, at least the villain has meaning.
The villain's on a quest of sorts.
Yeah.
A committed villain can learn. That's another thing too. What are we built for? I think we're built for maximal challenge. And that's way more interesting.
When you're young, you can deny God. Atheism is plausible, sometimes even necessary. You gotta really question everything, right? But sometimes those questions don't even need to be answered. You can just say, you know what? God ain't real. I'm gonna live my life and go about your way. And that's okay for a while, until eventually the questions keep on ringing in your ear. And eventually you're gonna have to face the truth. Because, as you get older, putting all the blame on the man in the sky just ain't quite enough anymore. It becomes intellectually negligent. You have to provide a greater answer to this life, into your experience, into your being. Then just none of it matters, or none of it is real, because you're real enough to have experienced everything in life now. And you can't just brush it under the rug as, I can't see it, so it's not real. Because by this time, you're old enough to know that the greatest experience in life and the realest experiences of life are not seen, they're felt. And in coming to that realization, what therefore constitutes the meaning to your being? Is it the rocky road atheism has paved, which has riddled us with dictatorial nations, languishing society in the hands of diversity and pseudo-equality? Or is it the righteous road paved by a sinless man, that is Jesus Christ? Now, it's up to you. The choice is yours and you're free to make whatever it is that you please. But eventually you're going to have to make that walk. You can't just stay in the side road and just not move. You can do that when you're young, but when you're older, you know time is ticking. And you're going to need to provide yourself and convince yourself with a greater truth that you can rest on. That by the end of your life, when the curtain's shut, you'll be at peace because you know what's coming next. And if not, it's a life wasted. And you don't want to be wasting your life. And if you're still confused about what life is, and you say like, you know what, none of this makes sense. Life ain't fair. Well, life ain't fair because life is a fair. And if you want to know more about that, watch this video right here. Thank you for watching this episode of The Third Eye. I'm Thirdy, helping you see life in plain sight. See you in the next one. Peace.